And joining us now, Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, who announced last week that he is running for president. Senator Paul, this controversy now, this seems to totally bog down in partisan politics. Where do you come down on all this?
You know, the funny thing is, occasionally I can be partisan as much as any other politician, but on this, I don't think I would jump to the conclusion that all of a sudden the Ayatollah of Iran is telling the truth and my government is lying to us. Now, I do think there's a problem, though, and the biggest problem we have right now is that every time there's a hint of an agreement, the Iranian foreign minister tweets out in English that the agreement doesn't mean what our government says it means. So I keep an open mind as to who's telling the truth, but the thing is that the Iranians aren't helping the situation by tweeting out in English that, oh, the agreement doesn't mean any of that, and they're going to go on with their nuclear program, they're not going to have inspections. So it is very, very damaging to the American public and to getting to the details of what the agreement are if we can't trust the sincerity or the credibility of the Iranian government.
So at this point, you have an open mind about this?
Yes, I want peace. I want negotiations. I don't want another war, but I also want a good agreement. And it's made it very difficult for someone like me, who is a Republican, who does believe in negotiations, does have an open mind. It's making it very difficult for me to get even to the specifics when I'm having trouble getting beyond whether or not I can believe that Iran is sincere in the negotiations.
Do you want a deal?
I want a good deal. I think I want that Iran will give up their nuclear ambitions. And I really do sincerely want a deal, and I don't want war.
Let's talk about your campaign. You have been reaching out to black voters, to millennials. You have said that the 1.1 million immigrants in this country already here should have some legal status and pay taxes. If I didn't know better, and I do know better, I would think you might be a Democrat. Do you really think you can get the Republican nomination making those statements and taking those positions?
Well, you add that to the fact that I'm also one of the most conservative members of the Senate, in the sense that I vote against spending, I vote against unbalanced budgets, I'm a proponent of lower taxes, so all of those are right within the mainstream of the party. But I do have some additional things. I call them sometimes the libertarian-ish kind of issues of believing in privacy, believing in criminal justice, that everyone fairly under the law, no matter the color of your skin. We still have a large problem in our country that if you are black, you're not always being treated fairly under the law, and I want to fix that.
I did say 1.1 million. I think I meant 11 million immigrants, but you want to find some sort of legal status for them.
What I want to do is first secure the border. If we secure the border and we can say we know who's coming, who's going, and only people come legally, the 11 million that are here, I think there could be a work status for them. And I think what I've tried to say is what we want is more legal immigration so we have less illegal immigration. But I am open to immigration reform. I voted against the bill that came forward, though, primarily because it limited the number of legal work visas.
Do you think there are some in the Republican Party who are not as interested in it becoming more inclusive than you are? And I say that because, after all, when the Republican Party became dominant across the South, it was right after the 1965 Civil Rights Law was passed.
I like to remember farther back in like 1928 when 2/3 of the African-American population voted Republican. It switched a lot in 32, but you're right, it kept dwindling, and we have not tried very hard. But I have been going. I've been to Ferguson, I've been to Detroit, I've been to Chicago, I've been to Milwaukee, I've been to a lot of our nation's bigger cities, and I've tried to say to the African-American population, 1, I'm going to fix the criminal justice system, 2, I believe in your privacy, and 3, I believe in economic opportunity. I'm for a $1 billion tax cut for Detroit to try to help them bail themselves out.
But do you think there's some in your party, and how a larger segment that it would be, that say we don't want to be more exclusive?
I don't think so. I'm not finding resistance. Like, you're going to have Ryan Priebus on here later today, and I've worked with the Republican National Committee. When we opened the office in Detroit, they were the ones in charge to open the office, and I was there helping them. So, no, I think the party, when I talk to people every day, even people who are trying to defend me in the nomination process, come up and say, oh, yeah, but we do like that you're trying to make the party bigger. So I'm not finding much objection from Republicans.
Hillary Clinton's getting ready to announce, maybe within the hour or so. What are her credentials for being president? We know the position she's had, but she's also been involved in a couple of controversies.
I think precisely what some will say is her strength is actually her weakness. her tenure as Secretary of State, there's one thing that people want as a commander-in-chief. They want someone who will defend the country. And when her 3 a.m. moment came, when she was asked to defend Benghazi, not just that night, but for 9 months leading up to Benghazi, they were begging and pleading for more security. And I think the fact that she didn't provide that security will go to the heart of the matter of whether or not we should have her as Commander-in-Chief.
She is a woman, and she is going to make a strong appeal to women.
I think the problem will be for her with that line is that she's taken money from countries that abuse the rights of women. In Saudi Arabia, a woman was raped by 7 men. The woman was then publicly whipped, and then she was arrested for being in the car with an unmarried man. I think we should be boycotting that activity, not encouraging it, and it looks really bad for the case of defending women's rights if you're accepting money. She accepted money from Brunei also, where they stone women to death for adultery. I doubt they stone men because women aren't allowed to make accusations. Women aren't on the juries. Women don't vote. And so it's going to be hard for her to say she's for women's rights when she's accepting money from sort of Stone Age sort of regimes that really abuse the rights of women.
What do you think your greatest challenge is going to be as a candidate?
I think it's portraying myself for who I am and not who people say I am. And that's probably true of all politicians. Your enemies will try to characterize you, and you have to spend your time trying to put forward who you actually are.
And what is your greatest strength?
I think it's honest. I'm genuine. I'm unafraid to answer questions. Sometimes gets me in trouble, but I try to be straightforward and I answer the question. And I think so often in politics, the people who rise to the top are the people who are the best at not answering questions.
Let me ask you about one thing. You said at one point that we should end all foreign aid, even to Israel. I understand you've kind of walked that back a little bit.
It's sort of interesting, and it's funny how people interpret it, because I still believe that, and always really have believed that. But what I have said is, in the interim, since I first said that, is that there's not much support for walking back any foreign aid in Washington. So I said, you know what, let's start with the people who burn our flags. Certainly there must be a consensus of people who hate us. I don't think Israel hates us. I think Israel is an important ally. And let's say, you know what, why don't I take Netanyahu's position? Netanyahu came here in '96 to a joint session of Congress and said, ultimately, Israel will be stronger when they provide for their own defense. Because right now, when we give them foreign aid, they actually have to buy from our defense contractors. They're developing their own defense industry, which is good for any nation. So I'm a supporter of Israel's and never have targeted them. But ultimately, every nation really is going to have to stand on their own 2 feet. And it should be like anything else we give to somebody, should be temporary and transient.
Well, Senator, I want to thank you. I always admire anyone who's willing to get out and do what you and these other candidates are doing, because it's a hard job.
Thank you.
It's a hard job to get the nomination in either party. So I wish you the very best.